We play and call it work.
Hey everybody, Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and welcome to our third episode of How to Play Age of Sigmar, 2nd edition. In this episode, we're going to talk about the movement phase. As usual, don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell icon next to it so you're notified when we put up new videos. If you want others to learn how to play Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, tell them to go to MiniWarGaming.com/HowToPlayAOS as an Age of Sigmar. And as always, for another as always, we are going to be playing a full game showing off the movement phase, as well as all the other phases of the game, but particularly the movement phase. And that'll be in a link in the video description below in the MiniWarGaming Vault, our paid subscription site where all our supporters go to watch thousands of extra videos and to help support us to make these videos. If you're not yet a Vault member, click the link. We'll give you a 7-day free trial to try it out. So today, movement phase, how to get your guys around the board. Let's look at it. In the movement phase, you can change the position of your models on the battlefield by doing movements. You start by picking a unit to move, and then you can move it up to a number of inches that is displayed on its war scrolls. For example, these Liberators right here, let's say this is Stormcast Eternal player's turn, and he chooses the Liberators and he wants them to move. Well, their war scroll card, as you can see here, shows that they can move 5 inches. And so in order to do that, each model can move up to 5 inches in any direction and change directions any number of times that they want, and must end their movement within 1 inch of another model from their unit, just like when they are deployed, and the unit forming one continuous line as well. So if I want to move this unit right here, I can have the Liberator Prime out front. Let's just put our measuring tape down right here, and he'll move 5 inches. Maybe the other ones behind them won't move as far, although reposition, or this one will go like this and then this, although right there it wasn't necessary, there might be a piece of terrain, and they'll reposition over here. You'll notice that none of them, no model, moved more than 5 inches, and they all ended together, in other words, within 1 inch of another model. That is what we call a normal move, and it follows all of those restrictions. Now, there are some things that you are not allowed to do. For example, with a normal movement, in other words, a movement in the movement phase, you are not allowed to end within 3 inches of any enemy models. If we check right here with our handy dandy widgets, we are not within 3 inches of the Chain Rasp hordes of the Nighthaunt player over here. If you started already within, so let's say we started the turn because we had been in combat with these Nighthaunt before, and they started already within 3 inches, the only type of move that they're allowed to make is what's called a retreat move. And what a retreat move is just a normal move again. I'm just going to move these without fully measuring them, just to pull them out to show you. But you should always use a measuring tape. And this move is allowed to be moved even though they started within 3 inches of an enemy. They're allowed to go within 3 inches of other enemies, but they must end more than 3 inches away from other enemy units, any others. So if this Knight of Shrouds, for example, was right here, and we had this unit down here, they're all within 3 inches, but they're not within 3 inches of the Knight of Shrouds. They could move within 3 inches of the Knight of Shrouds as long as they end more than 3 inches away from all enemies. They count as having retreated. They'll have certain restrictions in the shooting phase and combat, or in the charge phase later on. Terrain features provide obstacles to moving. In order to move over a terrain feature, such as this wall right here, you must pay the movement to go up and down this feature. So this feature I already measured to be 1 inch tall. So this Lord Selson on Dracoth normally can move 10 inches. So the first 2 inches would bring him to the wall. Then he has to spend 1 inch to get over it, and then he has to spend, let's see, what will that be? Another 4 inches to pass it, and another inch to go down. So that 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 4 brings us to 8 inches, and then he can move 2 inches further. Now I shouldn't be within 3 inches of those enemies, but as you can see, he had to give up some of his movement to move over that. Now the exception to this is any units that can fly. A lot of units can fly. Things that have wings, it'll always say in their war scroll whether they can, but all of these Nighthaunt actually are allowed to fly. And what fly will do is allows you to pass through models and terrain without being slowed down. So normally, if this Lord Celestant wanted to move, and he wanted to move behind the Liberators that are right there, he would have to go around them. He's not allowed to just pass through his own guys. Even though they are friendly, he would still have to travel around them and measure that full distance as his movement. But if this Knight of Shrouds wants to pass back through his own models, then he's allowed to do that. He could just pass right through them and end up over here beside them without having to worry about them being there or any terrain. A lot of things do have fly, so this is something that you're going to come across all of the time. The last thing you need to understand about movement is running. If a unit wishes to, they can run. This is done before they move, and running simply adds d6 inches to their movement. So if I say the Liberators here are going to run, I roll a die, and I add that amount to the movement that they're allowed to go. So this becomes, instead of 5 inches, they can now move 7 inches. This works exactly the same as a regular move, so they must stay more than 3 inches away from enemies. They cannot pass through models or terrain unless they have the fly special rule. They can go over terrain and down terrain, even if they don't have the fly, as long as they pay the extra movement. They can also use a run when they retreat. So if they start within 3 inches of an enemy and they move away from the enemy, they can actually run and retreat at the same time. It does have a consequence though. In the following shooting phase, they will not be allowed to fire missile weapons. And in the following charge phase, they will not be allowed to declare a charge. There are 2 final things I should actually point out. These are common mistakes that beginners make. And that is how to measure properly for the move. This Liberator, for example, if he was moving by himself, if I put this 3-inch measurement down, and I say that, let's say he's only allowed to move 3 inches, but I take him and I put him starting here and ending here, I actually ended up moving more than 3 inches, because at the beginning, I was measuring from the front of his base, and at the end, I was measuring at the back of his base. So if he was to actually move 3 inches, the front of the base starts at the 1-inch mark, or the 0-inch mark, and the front of the base would end at that. Now I could alternatively measure from the back of the base, so it starts at the back and ends at the back, but most people don't do that. Also, a model is free to pivot and face whichever way they want to go. Facing doesn't have too much of a variance, and those who are on circular bases, it really doesn't matter at all how you do this. But larger models, such as this Lord Celestant on Dracoth, if you do it in a certain way, let's say he started this way, and I say, well, I'm going to pivot for free, you can see that he ended up getting closer. If we look at, let's just put this down right here, when he turns, all of a sudden he's touching it. And so this actually does count towards his movement. Basically the rule is no part of the model can move further than their movement allowance. So technically that means if this Lord Celestant started this way, if he moved his full 10 inches this way and then turned all the way around, his back end will have moved further because it'll have started at the back and made it to the front. That's not such a big deal because the base ends up in the same positioning, but where it does matter is if he starts like this, if we turn him and then we move, we've got to account for that movement that the front has made to get to the new spot right here. In other words, he's gained about 1/2 inch, but you could even count it as a full inch depending on how you're going to measure it. Most people aren't too much of a stickler for this, but do make sure that you're not gaining any extra move or losing extra move by pivoting incorrectly with your models. And that is all you need to know about the movement phase. So hopefully with that information, you're ready to go and try moving your models around for the first time. As always, make sure you go and watch the battle report associated with this. This one is going to focus a lot on the movement phase, so making sure that whoever records it shows different types of movement, flying over terrain, around terrain, retreats, runs, all of those things should be showcased in that battle report at the link below in the MiniWarGaming Vault. If you're not a Vault member, please consider becoming one and supporting us because it helps us to make all of these videos. You can click the link and get a free 7-day trial to try it out before you really make your decision. And if you want others to learn how to play Age of Sigmar, just tell them to go to miniwargaming.com/howtoplayaos as an Age of Sigmar, and that'll redirect them to these videos so that you don't have to teach them. As always, please subscribe, click that bell thing so that you actually get notified, and happy wargaming.